many years later. Christobal, Chris, as he'd always been known here, couldn't quite stick with the protracted drama of the labour hours and had headed out into the car park and the nearby streets to pace and pirouette, a ball of anguish and called-up excitement. But when the all-clear came, Harry rushed back in to be by Mum's side and take me up in his arms. For some never-quite-explained reason, it was my hands he was most taken with. At least that's how Gran told it. "My son," he was said to have shouted, grabbing any nurse and passer-by who would listen, "has the most incredible hands." Gran always did love to tell that story, needing only the very slightest excuse to prompt the full recital. Were it possible, I'd like to tease Christobal about its veracity, and that of all the other little narrative flourishes that day has since been wrapped in. But that has not been possible for many years now. They had first met in Spain, at the very southern tip of Andalusia where Europe dissolves into Morocco and the rest of North Africa. In la Línea de la Concepción, a small and perpetually troubled coastal city of fewer than 70,000 people, not far from the geographic and territorial oddity of Gibraltar. Christobal's hometown and almost all he knew before his life in London. For as long as anyone can remember, it had been a city of smugglers and bandits, a frontier town founded as a bulwark against English conquest and only given formal recognition by the Spanish state in the late 19th century. What can I say about its family there other than the fragments that I've come to know over the years? A sprawling, working-class clan with many siblings and cousins, most of whom lived and worked in the city or its periphery. Perhaps that's one of the things that appealed to Mum on their first meetings. She was a Londoner, whose adulthood had grown to be marked by an increasingly intense love affair with all things Iberian. It stemmed from a trip to Granada with her eldest sister some years before in the late 1980s. There's a photo that still lives in my aunt's house from that first trip. Mum, sitting in the window of a cloister, sheltered from the dazzling afternoon light outside. With one hand resting under her chin, her eyes pointed out to an invisible horizon, a scene of almost religious contemplation and tranquility, like something from a Rossetti print. From that first visit, it said that she knew the country to be more like home than anything she'd known before. It had something to do with the vibrancy of colour, the subtle grades of light. These weren't things you found too often in Catford or Forest Hill, or whichever part of London she found herself living in during those long years before. But it usually takes more than just a different quality of light to fall properly in love. Mum was a middle child and a quiet, sometimes painfully shy young woman, having struggled with eating disorders and self-confidence in her peripatetic teenage years, totting between London council flats with Gran and her youngest sister. Perhaps as a consequence, she possessed a well-developed gift for secrecy, her life subdivided into tight, self-contained compartments, sometimes kept hidden from even the family and friends she was closest to. Yet there were also the passions that she couldn't help but wear on her sleeve: poetry and travel, mythology, and the idiosyncratic patterns of Roman history. For many years, she had herself lived with one leg in a local traveller community, growing her light brown hair past her waist and immersing herself in their ways of life. There is talk of another man from that time, though few, if any from her family, ever had the chance to meet him. And, in truth, no one now can even quite be sure of his name. He was just another silent part of her life. The same aunt who first took her to Spain once described her to me as having an invisible layer of skin missing. As a young girl, she would often burn the poetry and stories she had written, the shame of them being seen by any other living eye being something too much to bear. This is not to say Mum lacked resilience. You don't tend to leave alone for a foreign country as a woman in your early 30s without it, which is precisely what she managed after saving for a few months from her job as an admin assistant at Lambeth Council, from right after that first holiday. And an hour of Spanish every night, like clockwork, in preparation to realise the dream of a new existence. She made it real, soon enough after. It's here that the timeline falters slightly, at least in my telling of it. It must have been in the last years of the 80s when they met. Christobal was considerably younger than Mum, almost by a decade. Perhaps she was his first serious love and catalyst to a kind of adulthood he'd barely known to be possible. He was young, but his looks were never exactly boyish. Heavy-browed, with serious features, you could say he almost looked older than his years, despite his slight frame and height at little over 5'7". And perhaps she fell in love with the strength of his enthusiasms, of which there were many, flamenco music and dance, as well as the Spanish guitar and amateur boxing. Then, of course, there was his capacity for